So you know it's not a crime to be fascinated by all things criminal. And if you do like delving into the underworld, why not join us for a special live show on March 27th at the Cork Opera House. We'll be talking about the making of a cartel and all the wild and crazy stories that happened along the way. So why not join us for this special live show? Tickets from corkpodcastfestival.ie. You see, we just drop you in when you're expecting because you're here a while, and then you're least expecting it because you're just having a conversation. All of a sudden we're recording.
Yes, lovely.
Spencer Matthew, welcome very much to the show. You're not the usual character we have sitting here, but you're here in Dublin to promote Benacol and what you call habit stacking, which is when you do lots of good things that result in better health.
Why am I not your normal guest?
Well, I don't know. You tell me. Is there something that you have that is particularly attuned to the goings-on of organised crime, or have you built up a reputation for yourself as a major gangland figure?
Well, not yet.
Not yet. You're on the way.
Do you normally interview criminals themselves?
Sometimes.
That's pretty cool.
So a bit of both. But usually, actually, to be honest with you, we interview one another and we talk about stories that are, listen, we leave about 10 stories on the cutting room floor here practically every day.
That's pretty cool.
So there's just a lot of crime going on in this country. And the UK as well.
Yeah. So
it's a bit different actually though in the UK, isn't it?
What, crime?
Well, no, but you don't know the criminal figures by their first name anymore.
There's a couple of families that operate who are named. I don't know if it's a real name or not. I wouldn't wish to be involved with them. But there's a few. There's some quite famous gangs in London.
There's loads of, and I mean, years ago, I think in the UK there was this big obsession with organised crime around the time the Richardsons and the Crays, and everybody sort of knew the names, didn't they?
Yeah.
But now it's like the UK is so vast and it's so multicultural, and it's like as if, because I remember many years ago working for the Daily Mirror and they were just interested in celebrity. And I, of course, was hoping that I'd be able to do some crime stuff in the UK, but they'd no interest.
What fascinates you about crime?
I just find it, I suppose, criminals are interesting people and they live on the edge, don't they? And I like the whole idea of sitting around and organising a bank heist and getting down to the detail of it. And then can you imagine the thrill of, I'm going to cancel myself here now if I don't stop, but the thrill of actually getting away with something. I kind of get them. I wouldn't have the bravery or the courage maybe to do some of the things they do. Or maybe I wouldn't have the sort of violence in my soul to live in that world. But at the same time, I find it fascinating. And they've definitely, a lot of them have much more interesting lives than the rest of us.
I think, it takes a certain person, doesn't it? And that's what's interesting about it, to your point. It's a lack of general morality and empathy in some cases if you're causing physical harm to people.
Yeah.
To be able to just, carry on operating and living without, seeming to care about the victim. I don't know, it's interesting. I've always been drawn to dramas and documentaries about, dangerous, violent criminals because, as you say, it's kind of thrilling to see them operate. It's interesting that they walk among us. Certainly, I think the 50s, 60s, 70s, more so perhaps than now. Sometimes you watch these things and you go, well, you could never get away with that now. Because, a lot of the famous serial killers that people know about were operating, before fingerprints and mobile phones,
and all that.
Camera, so obviously quite easy to get away with stuff and get from A to B undetected. But nevertheless, pretty interesting character traits.
Definitely. And serial killers, as we know them, as we see them in the movies, are nearly, I'm going to say, a thing of the past, but not everywhere in the world. But in some places they are. And at the same time, a serial killer is somebody who can murder 2 or more people with a period in between where they have a break. So there's plenty of those that aren't necessarily the likes of those that we're going to talk about that, make suits out of human skin and the like.
Ed Gein.
You have been working on a film which will be out at some point this year for Channel 4, which is all around this sort of psychopaths, sociopaths. What is that? We're not going to talk about the details of exactly what you're doing, but I was interested to see that you were sort of chosen, you loved it because a couple of your friends and people close to you had suggested, are you a sociopath? Are you a psychopath?
Yeah. Now that word's been chucked around for most of my adult life towards me, whether it be in jest or serious is another matter. My former agent, who's Vogue's current agent, Louisa, who I hope is still a friend, used to call me psychopathic all the time.
Right. Why?
To be honest, I'm not. I don't really know. My views are pretty black and white on stuff. I'm quite a logical thinker. I know that I'm quite different to people. I feel that I'm different to lots of people that I meet. I don't connect on an emotional level in the same way that some people would. I don't feel certain feelings that are considered to be very normal. I generally lack empathy. It's not by choice. I've only began recently really noticing the difference in my feelings and other people's feelings. And anyway, so, when you hear something over and over again, you begin to question, are people just flinging this word around without understanding what it is? Or do they know something that I don't? And, am I a psychopath? And, the film is called Spencer Matthews' Am I a Psychopath, right? So it's an exploration of my psyche.
When you look back on those big famous sort of serial killers, there is a kind of voyeurism to how we looked at them and, how they were turned into these monsters and dramas, which of course they were. Which of those big name serial killers really interest you and why?
Honestly, there's loads of them. Ed Gein is the kind of OG, isn't he?
And he's the guy I mentioned that, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know, he wanted to make a suit out of skin, didn't he?
Ed Gein inspired quite a few famous films and different characters in different films. So he inspired the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He inspired Silence of the Lambs. Our Bill, Buffalo Bill, making the suit out of the women's skin. Ed Gein was a schizophrenic. So he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, which means that he would feel that he had done certain things, but he actually hadn't. So his lines between reality and fiction were completely blurred in his own mind. He was killing people, and he was skinning people, and he lived in Wisconsin, in a small place called Plainview. I think he was called the Plainview murderer or the Plainview something. And literally had a house full of dead bodies. This is in the middle of the 50s, right? There was literally, no one around. You had to drive for miles and miles to get anywhere. Like, he would just walk into bars and shoot the barmaid and, drag her out by her hair and, leave blood all over the place and put it in his van and drive off and, wouldn't make any effort to tidy up after himself. And, was just, he was a very sick, ill person, right? And would create scenarios in his mind that weren't real. So he would be insulted by these people, like in his reality, and then that wasn't happening, and then he'd go and kill them as a result of it and skin people. He was a body snatcher as well, and would he'd dig up dead bodies and keep them in his house, and he had a relationship with one of them, and it's pretty grim existence. Yeah, and he was very mentally
ill. He was a
ill.
rarity, wasn't he, as well? Yeah. Like, I mean, he would have been. There's not many human beings like that. You think?
Certainly not nowadays. I don't think. But it's hard to say who's out there really. You've got all kinds of cases.
A lot of people nowadays get all that sort of, that the fantasy is all online, isn't it? And it's,
But he inspired a whole host of serial killers. And if the documentary about him is to be believed, he helped catch Ted Bundy. And Ted Bundy's another fascinating one to me because he's, in an alternative universe, he'd be quite cool almost. Like he's pretty slick. He's charming. He's psychopath 101, right? Yeah. He's superficially charming, has absolutely no empathy, massive delusions of grandeur, like to the point where he believes he can defend himself, right, in court. He's not even a lawyer. He's actually shooting himself in the foot repeatedly, right, trying to get himself off crime. But he's so fascinated by his own crime that he's like giving stuff away in court about himself, so further incriminating himself because he's so into himself, right? He almost wants people to know. But he's fascinating. Broke out of jail twice. Who breaks out of jail? That's despite obviously not liking Ted Bundy, kind of cool to break out of jail, isn't it? I mean, like, you know, if you're being held in a jail cell, breaking out. I mean, that's
why I talk about the risk and the planning, I suppose. What drew you to an interest in all that, or do you remember? Were you, as a kid, interested in that?
Maybe not as a child, you know, a bit early to be getting into that stuff. But yeah, as a teenager, maybe I was always interested in it. I just think, same reasons as you, really. Why do these people take these risks? You know, why do they bend the rules of what it is to be, you know, to fit into society? You know, why is it that they're happy to take life in this way, and what do they gain from it? You know, Ted Bundy was a famous murderer of women. You know, he would pretend that he had issues with his car and then bash them around the head with a crowbar and you know, would often return to the scenes of his crime. I always found it interesting when you're looking at these famous criminals who are obviously, these particular examples were all incarcerated and in some cases killed. You know, why risk getting caught in the way that they do? You know, like Ted Bundy would literally cover up women in the woods and leave them there and go back and revisit the bodies and have sexual encounters with the bodies like days later. Why risk that? Like, you know, there must be, obviously these people aren't normal people.
Well, that has to be surely the hint of the narcissism, that they have to own it. They have to be the ones to, you know, they can't help themselves.
Yeah.
So they kind of really want the world to know what they've done.
If I'm not mistaken, in the mid-70s, Ted Bundy went on a spree and went into a dormitory, like a sorority house, and just kind of beat up and strangled and sexually assaulted a woman, and then went into like the next door room, did the exact same thing to the girl next door, and then when somebody kind of heard and called the police, exited the building, went down the road, broke into a random house and killed that. Like, that's just no control. You know what I mean? Zero. Like, completely. He's not even thinking about it, right? Like, hasn't determined where he's going to go or who he's going to kill. You know, it started that way. Real, just lost control at the end. You know, biting people, leaving all kinds of marks. It's just, I don't know. It's real wild stuff. I don't know what it is. I wouldn't say I'm attracted to it. I just find it interesting that.
So do you watch this kind of stuff at home, and do you watch it alone, or does Vogue quite like it too? I often wonder, because it really turns her on. Creepy for people who don't like this stuff. I've one at home that every time she comes into the sitting room and I have something on, she sort of springs back out of the room and can't watch it. And some people are able for it and the detail, and some people aren't.
I think she used to watch scary stuff and criminal things. Less so now.
Yeah, she better things to do.
I have to say, the Ed Gein one was a really difficult watch, and I don't know what it was. It was before Project 7. If you don't know what Project 7 is, I just got back in December. I did a couple of world records. It was an Ironman in every continent.
Yes,
quite a
I've
quick
heard you talking about it. Yeah,
and I lost a bunch of sleep before the start of that race. I've always been a good sleeper. I can sleep here if you want, right? Like, I can sleep in a cab, on a bus, and on a train, no problem. I just shut my eyes, I'm off to sleep. Never had a history of bad sleep. I don't know if it was Project 7, the anticipation of Project 7, you know, the swimming in sub-zero waters, the dangerous wildlife, or the Ed Gein show, right? Because when I first started watching it, and he gets into, particularly around the necrophilia and the digging up of the old women and the, you know, having sex with the dead bodies on the table, like, it's quite graphic. And like, Vogue was lying next to me and she was reading a book, and I was watching it and I was thinking, God, this is a lot for Netflix. You know, like, this is a big scene for Charlie Hunnam, right? Like, having sex with a corpse, like in the middle of a kitchen, like drooling all over her. And I just thought, that's you know, the thing would have worked without that scene, I think. And you know, I thought the show was good. A lot of people had a lot of criticism about all kinds of stuff, that it's not factually correct, and that Charlie Hunnam's accent was. I thought Charlie Hunnam was brilliant, right? Like, I love Charlie Hunnam from Sons of Anarchy and all kinds of stuff. I even saw him in Green Street all those years ago. He's always been a, you know, dashing, good-looking, you know, English, cool guy. I thought he did a brilliant job of portraying this serial killer. This deeply troubled serial killer, Ed Gein. And yeah, just, I don't know. I struggled with it.
I kept you awake, you mean?
I think so, yeah. I think it's either him or the leopard seals.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of the two.
Okay.
You know, getting dragged to the depths of, you know, the icy waters by a 500-pound, you know, apex predator wouldn't be great either. But
I would be way more scared of that.
Yeah, no.
Absolutely.
No, it was horrid. Well, I didn't get dragged by a seal, but, could have been.
But that actually could have happened. You could have been a victim of that.
Yeah.
But it's unlikely that you're going to be a victim.
It's also, do you want to know where
serial killer?
Do you want to know where my mind goes?
Don't get it.
Well, where my mind goes is, and I would think about this kind of stuff. This is so weird to talk about, but I would lie in bed and I would think about, so if you're swimming in this Antarctic water, it's absolutely horrific. And all of a sudden this leopard seal comes, right? And it takes you and it bites into the side of you and it takes you down.
Right.
You would know, right, that's curtains. It's, that's the end.
Yeah.
And it's just like, to it's just nothing, right? It has no idea like what it's taking or what this thing is leaving behind or whatever. Yeah. Like it has no. It's just it's a raw animal, and imagine the awful feeling of just being dragged down into pitch black water by this huge vicious thing, and I'd be like, it doesn't even know any better. Like a human being, obviously killing another human knows exactly what's up, right? Like if you just end up with some leopard's toy, like some leopard seal's toy, it'd just be ghastly, wouldn't it? Like horrible.
It would be absolutely, and the it wouldn't realize that you might make headlines for having died in such a way. Like it's pointless exercise.
Well, I mean, it would make headlines. I think there's no might involved. I think not even because it's me. I think anyone getting eaten by a leopard seal would probably be news, wouldn't it?
And is the have people been eaten by them?
Leopard seals have killed people, yeah.
Like lots of people.
Well, not many people swim in Antarctica, so that was the thing. They said there's only been kind of 3 leopard seal related deaths, and I was like, how many people have swam here? I was like, 4.
Okay, right.
No, that's not what they said, but it's kind of it would be rare. I was trying to figure out. I was like, the fact that there's only been 3 deaths doesn't really mean anything until I find out how many people have actually been in the water.
Yeah, no, I can tell you, no, that would be a fate worse than Ed Gein to me.
Yeah.
So you're there anyway. You watch this sort of stuff at home. This is your genre, is it? Crime, true crime.
I love it. Yeah. No, I find it fascinating. I love Mindhunter. I love Silence of the Lambs. And
it's a bit of an escapism, I think, always as well, isn't it? Because it's not the real world. It's you're sort of dipping into something. The dramas are usually pretty exciting, and even if they are sort of true story, it's funny to be able to say, and we do have to admit it because the levels of popularity around it, people find crime entertaining. And, you found the digging up the dead bodies and everything. You were still watching. You might have had one eye closed, but you were still watching it.
Oh, I'm watching. No, I like it. Not the necrophilia.
Do not have to worry about.
No, but you know what I mean.
I
find it fascinating, but also that they can all be so different, and how their crafts are also different. It's not like they kind of copy each other. Obviously, some of them do, and they get inspiration from each other. But then you've got John Gacy, who's just completely unhinged, right? It's just some how many bodies did he have under his house? 50 or something. It's just, how do they get away with it? He just picks up these young men. He was a killer of men, right? And he dressed up he clowned as well. He's a clown. He clowns. I don't like that.
No, don't
you like it? No, I don't like it.
No,
I don't like it.
I don't like clowns. I don't actually like clowns.
No, I don't like clowns. In every sense of the word. But can you imagine? So Gacy, in his spare time would dress up as a clown, right? And he would go to parties and clown in his free time. I love the way that we've turned clown into a verb. And so he would clown.
Yeah.
And oh God, and people would wake up and he's tied up their feet and he's sat there dressed as a clown, and then all of a sudden he's grim. He has to, I think he's up there with the most menacing.
Yeah.
John Wayne Gacy.
And yet again, I suppose all of these people, we now have a greater understanding of what's going on with them, and really that they should have, to be really PC, they should have been in mental health institutions being helped.
Are you asking if that's my opinion?
Should we be, finding them? Not necessarily, but I just think our understanding has changed, hasn't it? Yeah, our understanding of what's going on with people.
It's all obviously I'm not an expert in criminology. I'm just a fan of documentaries and things that are made. So I watch things that are available to people listening to this will go, well, he's just watched the John Gacy tapes. What does he know about John Gacy? That's all I know about John Gacy, right?
No, because you've thought about it, you've considered it, and I think that's the thing. I think nowadays people who do watch and are interested in this educate themselves all the time.
Yeah, I really don't know what should be done with criminals like them, because you can't slap them on the wrist. right? You know, it's too serious for that. Execution by death in certain states, you know, I think fits the crime in many cases. You know, but it's you know, that's a much wider conversation. And I don't know, like lifelong incarceration, obviously. But yeah, to your point, when you watch something like Ed Gein, not to come back, you know, because we've got plenty to talk about moving forward. But, you know, when you're schizophrenic or you're mentally ill in the way that Ed Gein is, you can almost slightly feel sorry for him because it's not really his fault. Like when you look at like a Jeffrey Dahmer as well, like his behavior is awful, and obviously he's a serial killer, and there's no real way to empathize with him. But he's also confused, and he is famously not a psychopath because he has lots of emotional feelings towards his victims, and he ultimately just wanted to be loved. Like he wants to be liked by people. He's very
peculiar way.
He's deeply odd, deeply unpopular, always been strange. But he has abandonment issues as well, right? People don't love him. He's on his own. He's living this awful life, and he wants to be around people. You know, the fact that he then decapitates them and stores their heads in boxes all over his room is a shame, right?
Yes,
you know, there's no need for it.
No.
But you know, it's too much. You know, you needn't do it. But
I suppose these are the kind of characters that
people. Do you feel sorry for them at all?
Look, those extreme. I certainly feel sorry for people who do things that you know they shouldn't be in public at all, and there's obviously something mad going on inside their head, this paranoia, delusions, all of that. I think we should feel that we let them down in a way because our society doesn't have enough mental health facility or funding towards that.
And also probably worth mentioning, like, obviously, you would feel far more sorry for the victims and the victims.
Of course.
Like, you know, I hope that goes without saying. We're just
absolutely. We're
discussing the killer here, but you know, obviously the victims of these violent crimes are far more important, you know, to consider than the killer themselves. But it is odd, isn't it? If that is just your makeup and you're ill and you don't fully know what you're doing, and you know you have no bearing of what's right or wrong. It's kind of, I don't know. I think it's
but to grow,
it's a far deeper discussion than just to look at them and go, well, they're just a monster. Why are they a monster?
It's not black and white, really, is it? And I suppose, I mean, like and your film going forward adds to it. But growing as a society over the decades, like way back, we used to believe that it was a birth injury that made somebody like that. You know, forceps during birth, or that. Now, we were kind of coming along the frontal lobe as people began to understand the brain and all the rest of it. But there was all sorts of reasons put forward that people were bad. And I think as we've come to this point, and we will understand more going forward, we now understand that it is traumas in childhood plus early life. It is sometimes people are born and the brain isn't properly wired, and that they may need treatment or something for that. There's that other sort of element, that bad or evil thing, which I think is we don't understand that yet. But, you know, every time somebody attempts to delve into the likes of what is psychopathy, as you will, we learn something new. And I think it's interesting as well that you've probably looked on this, but there is positives with it for living life, because you do have certain aspects of both it and sociopathy that do very well in business or in, you know, with successful people.
If you knew anyone that needed brain surgery, you better hope that your brain surgeon's a psychopath.
Right.
You know, like there's I think 84% of brain surgeons are psychopaths. Something like that. You'd want them to have a lack of empathy, right? So they're cutting your head open, right? To operate on your brain. You know, my wife, who's deeply empathetic, would never be able to cut somebody's skull open to operate on a brain. She'd be too worried about getting it wrong and hurting the person. This bloke's going to dig into your brain, fix it, hopefully, because he's been so dramatically driven towards being the best surgeon he could possibly be at his own family's expense, probably, so that he can save this person. You know, so if I ever need brain surgery, I hope it's a psychopath that gives it to me.
If you're a crimeworld.com subscriber, you've probably already binged on our latest exclusive podcast series, The Regency 10 Years On, from the hit that changed gangland forever. This 6-part anniversary special revisits that fateful day when David Byrne was shot dead at the Northside Hotel, igniting a bloody feud between the Kinahan and Hutch gangs, one of the deadliest rivalries in Irish history. Here's a taste of the new series, exclusive to crimeworld.com subscribers. So that Friday was one of those really quiet days. I mean, we all knew that Daniel Kinahan was in Dublin for the Clash of the Clans boxing weigh-in. At least we knew he was due into Dublin the next day. That Clash of the Clans bout match had been heavily advertised. But the day itself there was just little going on.
So there was very little happening that day. It's February. It's kind of a quiet enough time for news in general. And Alan Cherry and Ernie Leslie were on the road. They were at another story actually in Finglas.
What was that, do you remember?
Well, it was one of these classic sort of district court stories where a guy had, I think some teenagers had thrown stones at his car and he got out and slapped the teenager. Always great kind of human stories because some people feel sorry for the teenagers and some people don't. And so Alan had been out there, but the guy had moved on. He called out to his house to see if he wanted to talk. He'd moved on, he wasn't there. And we discussed going to the Regency earlier. And I said, look, just go along and see what happens, divert there. We obviously weren't expecting anything. And obviously that point of Alan being there would be the subject of conspiracy, but we'll get into that at a later point.
For sure. So it was a case really that day of, one thing hadn't worked out, so go to the next. But also there was definitely a general sense of, if we could be there, just in case.
Yes, and as you said, to see who was standing beside the Kinahans and who wasn't from that bigger organised crime group. So Alan and Ernie went out. I got a call. I think you got a call almost simultaneously, but I got a call from Alan. I'd spoken to him earlier on the day saying, see what happens. And he phoned me up and said, there's after being a shooting and I think we've got a picture. And I actually went, yeah, very funny. But of course, he stopped me and said, no, I'm serious. We're after, there's some guys come out with a gun, there's shots fired and there's total and utter chaos. And, our first thought is, get yourself safe. I have to admit, my second thought was, I hope they did get good pictures. But, you're still thinking they have to get safe. I mean, I know you probably got a similar call because Ernie and Alan obviously were in the same Jeep.
And of course, Ernie's the guy taking the photographs,
yes.
So he's on the phone to me. So I actually had gone for a pizza for lunch and I had come back over to the office and the phone rings and it was Ernie. And I answered and he was panicked on the other end of the phone. This was real high octane stuff. And he's still trying to take photos. He's trying to tell me what's happened. He's told me he thinks he's got a good one of one of the shooters as they were running from the scene. He was trying to call up the photograph on the back of his camera.
Yeah.
Because it would have taken him a while to get it onto a screen, but he'd also sent it into the office.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So he was kind of in the middle of doing a number of things. And as I was on the phone to him from memory, the photograph came into the office and we put it up on the big screen. And it was clear to see that this wasn't just one of the shooters as he suspected, but it was two. One of them was dressed as a woman.
Which is, of course, there was also this confusing story about guards coming in with weapons, and obviously we know now that they weren't ERU guys, they were guys dressed as them. But Alan was telling me this, there was talk of these guards, and then obviously there was, the crowd fleeing from the scene. So it was all confusing. But as you said, Ernie had taken a picture of the back of his camera. People will know what the photographer's cameras look like, and they have a little digital screen. You don't see it in great detail, but we knew this is a once-in-a-lifetime photograph has been gotten.
Yeah, as soon as it came in. And of course, look, the newsrooms aren't as busy as they used to be. They used to be very busy buzzy places with phones ringing everywhere. And it felt like a proper newsroom that day. I remember everybody's phone was going. People were hearing little bits about it. The news was starting to break about it. And of course, we were there sitting in the office with this photo. There's that sort of news sense in you that you want to run this.
Yeah.
And at the time, we weren't putting stuff up online. This would have been held for the paper on the Sunday. And this is a Friday afternoon. We had something really special here. But we also, I think, knew the guards were going to be desperate for that picture because they were two gunmen running from a scene of a crime. So it was a very compromised situation, and there was a bit of arguments going on, and there was voices were raised.
Totally. I mean, because it is complex. I mean, normally the journalism likes to keep itself separate from the Gardaí investigations. So Garda investigations go on and journalism reports on them. But obviously then you're put in this compromising position because you have guys running out visibly with handguns in their hands. And, they're obviously then disappeared into the ether. And you have to have a discussion about what is your civic responsibility in terms of, do you help the guards? You don't want these armed gunmen to run down the street and kill another few people. So it was a complex one, and people were aware straight away that the guards are going to want these pictures and want to use it for their purposes. And we also have our purposes, which is to tell what happened and to report on the news. So there was a conflict straight away.
From my memory, as the afternoon went on and I was talking to contacts and to other people who were involved in crime journalism, etc., it became apparent that there were no guards at the weigh-in. That in actual fact, the guards didn't seem to be there at all. They were called literally by the hotel and had arrived in response to what had already gone on. Of course, David Byrne had been shot dead in the reception of the hotel. We were getting photographs in later in the day, which showed a very shocked-looking Liam Byrne standing outside the hotel, his hands in his pockets, standing beside his cousin Liam Rowe, another significant cartel member. There was no sign of Daniel Kinahan. I was getting calls from people who were telling me that these professional killers had been flown into the country and had already been flown out. There was rumours, there was spin, and also there was the general, I suppose, conversations in regards to, oh my God, what is going to happen next? I mean, all anyone knew for sure was something was going to happen. David Byrne was a very, very senior lieutenant. He was also from criminal royalty from the Byrne family. His brother-in-law is Thomas Bomber Kavanagh. His brother is Liam Byrne, and he's very much at the heart of the Kinahan cartel. We knew from the beginning that this attack had occurred as part of the rivalry between the Kinahan and Hutch factions of what was once the one organisation. And I think everybody was really trying to predict what this might lead to, but nobody could have guessed.
Nobody could have guessed. And of course, those rumours straight away went around. It was straight away focused on the Hutch gang. But at this time, if you remember, while there had been other incidents, for example, an attempted hit on Jerry Hutch in Lanzarote, those incidents weren't always public. People were straight away thinking this isn't the type of normal organised crime operation. They were looking at the weapons, saying, is there a paramilitary organisation involved here? Nobody knew fully. And of course, what people did fear straight away was, no matter what, people knew how big and how powerful the Kinahans had become, and the likelihood of them not striking back was inevitable. That blood was going to flow.
That bit absolutely 100%. But at that very early stage, I recall contacts of mine suggesting that the Hutches were an army. Did they have the backing of the dissidents? Was this going to, were they going to be very heavily armed because of that? They had contacts in the north. It was like as if people were trying to size up how two Premiership teams were going to play against one another. That's what it felt like. You've been listening to an extract from the Regency. 10 years on from the hit that changed gangland forever. Visit crimeworld.com and subscribe to hear the full series now. And you'll also get exclusive access to our other podcast deep dives on the Dapper Don, Christy Kinahan, Thomas Bomber Kavanagh, and more.